The cost of justice. The first light of dawn crept through Dr. Harrison's parlor windows, finding James still awake in the chair by the window. Eleanor had finally fallen asleep near 3 in the morning, her head resting against his shoulder, but sleep had eluded him entirely. Outside, 2 mounted police constables maintained their watch, their red serge tunics visible in the growing light. Beyond them, Medicine Hat was beginning to stir, smoke rising from chimneys, the first wagons creaking down Main Street. James shifted carefully, trying not to wake Eleanor. His wounded side ached, a dull, persistent reminder of how close he'd come to dying. Through the wall, he could hear Mrs. Brennan moving in the kitchen, the familiar sounds of breakfast preparation, a strange comfort after the violence of the night before. Footsteps on the stairs made him tense, his hand moving instinctively toward the rifle leaning against his chair. But it was only Sarah, fully dressed despite the early hour, her hair braided back with military precision. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked quietly, settling into the chair opposite him. James shook his head. "Keep thinking about those men who got away. 3 to 5 of them," Sergeant Morrison said. "Professional killers who know we're the reason their job failed." "They'll run," Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. "The consortium's finished. Why would they stay?" "Because they were paid," James said, "and because men like that don't like leaving work undone. Makes them look unreliable to future employers." Sarah was quiet for a moment, her gaze distant. "When does it end, then? When do we get to stop watching the shadows?" Before James could answer, Eleanor stirred against his shoulder, her eyes opening slowly. She straightened, wincing at the stiffness in her neck. "What time is it?" "Nearly 6, Sarah said. "Mrs. Brennan's making breakfast. Thomas Garrett wants to take our depositions at 8. Eleanor rubbed her face, then looked at James. "You didn't sleep at all, did you?" "Someone needed to keep watch." "The mounted police are watching," Eleanor pointed out, but her tone was gentle. She understood. After months of being hunted, trust didn't come easily, even when help wore red serge and carried official authority. Dr. Harrison appeared in the doorway, already dressed for the day. "Coffee's ready? And I should warn you. There's quite a crowd gathering outside the railroad hotel. Word spread about last night." James stood, moving to the window. Harrison was right. Even at this early hour, knots of people clustered on the boardwalk across the street, their faces turned toward the hotel where Thomas Garrett had taken rooms. A few pointed toward Harrison's house, no doubt recognizing it as the site of last night's confrontation. "The whole town will know by noon," Sarah observed. "Good," Eleanor said firmly. "Let them know. Let everyone know that the consortium sent killers and the law stopped them. Let them know we're not the criminals here." James glanced at his wife, seeing the steel in her expression. Months ago, Eleanor would have shrunk from such public attention. Now she welcomed it as a shield. A knock at the front door made them all tense. Dr. Harrison moved to answer it, and James heard Sergeant Morrison's distinctive baritone. A moment later, the sergeant appeared in the parlor doorway, his uniform showing the dust and strain of a long night. "Morning, folks," Morrison said. "Thought you'd want an update. We've got 7 men in custody, including the 3 who tried to come through your back door. They're not talking much yet, but they will. Marshal Davis is coordinating with the territorial prosecutor." "And the ones who escaped?" James asked. "No sign of them," Morrison admitted. "We've got patrols out, but they had a good head start. Could be halfway to Calgary by now, or holed up waiting for another chance." He paused. "Mr. Garrett wants to see you at 8 sharp. Says he has evidence that'll make your depositions the final pieces he needs." "We'll be there," James said. Morrison nodded, then his expression softened slightly. "For what it's worth, you folks did well last night. Took courage to set that trap, knowing what might come through your door." After the sergeant left, they gathered around Mrs. Brennan's breakfast table. Thomas appeared, rubbing sleep from his eyes, and climbed into the chair next to Eleanor. For a few minutes, they ate in relative silence, the normalcy of hot porridge and fresh bread, a stark contrast to the night's violence. Daniel arrived just as they were finishing, his face drawn with fatigue. He'd been at the Thornton homestead through the night, helping Samuel and Martha process the events. "They're holding up," he reported, accepting the coffee Mrs. Brennan pressed into his hands. But Samuel says the whole district's talking. Every homesteader within 20 miles will know by tonight. Let them talk, Sarah said. Maybe it'll make the consortium think twice before trying this again somewhere else. Daniel's hand found hers on the table. Or maybe it'll make them more desperate to silence you before your testimony goes on record. The clock on the mantel struck 7:30. James pushed back from the table. We should go. Edmund will be waiting. They walked to the railroad hotel in a group. James and Eleanor, Sarah and Daniel, with Edmund Whitmore joining them from his boarding house. 2 mounted police constables followed at a discreet distance. The morning was cold, frost still clinging to the shaded patches of boardwalk, and their breath formed clouds in the air. The crowd outside the hotel parted as they approached. James recognized faces. Henry Walsh and Margaret Fletcher, who'd provided the bridge loan. Johann Schmidt and Peter Reed, their homesteads intact but their families still recovering from the consortium's threats. Josiah Brennan, the assayer who'd risked his life to document their ore. Others he knew only by sight, merchants and homesteaders, railroad workers and shop owners. All of them watching, waiting to see what came next. Inside, Thomas Garrett had commandeered the hotel's small dining room. He stood as they entered, a lean man in his mid-30s with sharp eyes and the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. His suit was rumpled from travel, but his handshake was firm. Mr. and Mrs. Mackenzie, he said. Miss Mackenzie, thank you for coming. I know last night was difficult. Last night was necessary, James said. Sergeant Morrison says you have evidence. 8 months' worth, Garrett confirmed, gesturing to the table where documents were spread in careful stacks. Letters between Hartwell and the consortium leadership, bank transfers for services rendered, testimony from a Winnipeg lawyer who handled their land acquisitions. And most importantly, he tapped a leather folder. Sworn statements from families in 3 other territories who barely survived similar attacks. Eleanor moved closer, her eyes scanning the papers. You can prove they've done this before? Not just prove it, Garrett said. I can show the pattern. The same tactics in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and here. Identify valuable mineral deposits on homestead land, use legal challenges and intimidation to drive off the owners, then buy the claims through intermediaries. When intimidation fails, he paused, they escalate to violence. The Henderson family, Sarah said quietly. Among others, Garrett confirmed. 3 families we know of who disappeared entirely. 2 more who fled and were willing to testify once they learned they weren't alone. Your family's testimony will tie it all together. The mine discovery, Blackburn's murder, the siege, last night's attack, everything. James felt Eleanor's hand slip into his. What do you need from us? For the next 2 hours, they gave their depositions. Garrett's questions were precise, methodical, building a narrative that stretched from their arrival on the homestead 3 years ago to the moment the mounted police had called out in the darkness. He asked about the Henderson letters, about finding the mine, about every threat and confrontation with Blackwood's men, and later with Hartwell's killers. When it came to Sarah's turn, she described the night in the mine shaft when they'd found Garrett's body and the evidence of Blackwood's murder. Her voice was steady, clinical, as if she were reporting facts rather than reliving trauma. James watched his daughter transform into a witness, every emotion locked away behind a facade of calm competence. And you believe the consortium leadership, Richard Ashford, George Pemberton, Thomas Whitfield, and Jonathan Carver, ordered these attacks? Garrett asked. I know they did, Sarah said. Hartwell's letters prove it. The telegram we intercepted proves it. And the fact that they sent professional killers to our door last night proves they're desperate to stop the truth from reaching authorities. Garrett made careful notes. The challenge will be connecting them directly to last night's attack. They'll claim Hartwell acted independently, that they knew nothing about his methods. Then we use the pattern, Eleanor said. She'd been quiet through most of the depositions, but now she leaned forward. The other families, the same tactics, show that this is how they always operate, through layers of intermediaries and plausible deniability. But the pattern proves intent. Garrett smiled. You should have been a lawyer, Mrs. Mackenzie. I'm a homesteader, Eleanor said, but I've learned to recognize evil when it hides behind respectability. By the time they finished, the The sun was high, and the dining room had grown warm. Garrett collected the signed depositions carefully. This goes to the territorial prosecutor today. He'll present it to the court in Regina. With Hartwell and his men in custody, and your testimony on record, we have a real chance of bringing charges against the consortium leadership. How long? James asked. Months, probably. Men like Ashford don't go down easily. They'll hire the best lawyers, use every connection they have. But the evidence is solid, and public sentiment matters. The newspapers are already running stories about last night. Carver's own papers can't suppress this. They emerged from the hotel to find the crowd had grown. News of their depositions had spread, and now people pressed forward with questions, congratulations, and in a few cases, barely concealed fear. James saw it in their faces, the recognition that the consortium's reach extended far beyond the Mackenzie claim, that every homesteader with valuable land was potentially at risk. Henry Walsh pushed through the crowd. James, Eleanor, a word? They stepped aside, and Walsh's expression was grave. I've been talking to folks. There's concern. If the consortium sent killers here, what's to stop them from trying again? What's to stop them from targeting anyone who helped you? The law, James began. The law arrested 7 men last night, Walsh interrupted. But 3 to 5 got away. And the consortium has resources we can't match. If they decide to make examples of us, they won't, Eleanor said firmly. Not now. Not with the world watching. Last night changed everything. They operated in shadows, but we've dragged them into the light. Walsh wanted to believe her. James could see it in his face. But fear was a powerful thing, and the consortium had spent months proving they were willing to kill. The depositions are on record, James said. If anything happens to us now, it only strengthens the case against them. They're smart enough to know that. Are they? Walsh asked quietly. Or are they desperate enough to try anyway? There was no good answer to that. They parted with promises to stay vigilant, to watch out for each other, to maintain the community solidarity that had helped them survive this far. Back at Dr. Harrison's house, exhaustion finally caught up with them. Thomas fell asleep on the sofa, and Sarah retreated upstairs with Daniel for a few hours of rest. James and Eleanor sat in the parlor, the afternoon sun slanting through the windows. We won, Eleanor said softly. Didn't we? Last night we won. We survived. James corrected. That's not quite the same thing. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. Henry's right to be afraid. The consortium won't stop just because we gave depositions. Men like that don't surrender. No, James agreed, but they'll be more careful now, more cautious, and that gives us time. Time for what? To build something stronger than fear, James said. A community that stands together, a legal case they can't ignore. A future where homesteaders don't have to live in terror of men with money and connections. Eleanor leaned against him, and for a long moment they simply sat together, drawing strength from each other's presence. Outside, the mounted police maintained their watch. Somewhere in the territories, the consortium's escaped killers were making their own plans. And in Regina, wheels were beginning to turn that might bring justice to men who'd operated above the law for too long. As evening approached, Sergeant Morrison returned with news. We've identified 2 of the men who escaped, William Cross and Jack Delaney, both with records stretching back to Chicago, known associates of Martin Hartwell. The 3rd man's still unknown, but we're working on it. Will you find them? Sarah asked. Morrison's expression was honest. Maybe, maybe not. Men like that know how to disappear. But we'll keep looking, and we'll keep you protected until we're certain the threat has passed. After he left, James found himself back at the window, watching the street as darkness fell. The question Sarah had asked that morning echoed in his mind. When does it end? When do we get to stop watching the shadows? He didn't know the answer. But as he looked at his family, Eleanor helping Thomas with his evening lessons, Sarah and Daniel talking quietly in the corner, Dr. Harrison and Mrs. Brennan preparing supper, he realized something important. They'd changed. All of them. The family that had arrived in Medicine Hat 3 years ago, full of hope and naive dreams about frontier life, no longer existed. In its place was something harder, more resilient. Scarred by violence and loss, yes, but also bound together by shared struggle in a way that prosperity could never have created. The cost of justice, he thought, wasn't just measured in money or time. It was measured in innocence lost, in children who grew up too fast, in the permanent wariness that came from knowing how easily evil could wear a respectable face. But the alternative, surrendering, accepting that power and wealth placed men above the law, that cost was higher still. As the family gathered for supper, James raised his glass of water in a quiet toast. To survival, he said, and to whatever comes next. They drank together, and outside the window, the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. The battle wasn't over, but they were still standing, and sometimes on the frontier, that was victory enough.
Thanks for watching our stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic adventures. Thanks for watching our stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic adventures.